Hi guys, it's me again, Eric here at Mountaintop 9, and thanks for checking out this video. Of course, if you've clicked on it, you already know that I'm going to be talking about the Black Sabbath album, Born Again. I just love the purple background and the red demon baby there. It really strikes quite an impression upon you the first time you gaze at it. And this album, of course, is the first and only album to feature the great Ian Gillan on the lead vocals. And I'll tell you what, I grew up, the first Sabbath albums that I was introduced to as a kid was the Ozzy era and the Dio era. You had Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and then the great Dio albums like Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. So that's a lot of what I knew. And I still remember, man, I did not hear Born Again. I was about 10 or 11, and my dad didn't have the album. I bought it. This was in like 1994. I bought it on cassette at a used tape store. I remember putting it in my Walkman and listening to it. And the first thing, the first startling impression that this album made upon me was that I simply thought that the tape was broken. I thought that the tape, that the cassette itself, that it was like warped or that something was wrong with it because the sound was so shocking to me. I mean, the production, it didn't sound anything like the majestic heights of the Dio era where you had the nice polished sheen to the sound. You know, it didn't have that operatic nature to it, but it also didn't have, you know, even the Ozzy albums had a nice clean production. Even the more raw stuff like the first album and Master of Reality, yeah, it was a stripped down bare bones production, but it still sounded good. I mean, you could tell what the fuck was going on. When I put Born Again in and I was listening to it through those headphones, it blew my mind because it was just so grungy and dirty and raw, and it just kind of felt uncomfortable to my ears. It was an alien sensation to me. I was like, this isn't like any Black Sabbath I've ever heard before. So once I got past that, I started digging beneath and I realized, hey, there's some good songs here. Now vocally, this is much different than Dio, this is much different than Ozzy, and of course it's much different than Tony Martin. But you know, there's some kick-ass stuff on this album. And I'll tell you what, as far as the production goes, the only thing that I can compare the experience of hearing this album for the first time and being just startled by the production sound, it just made me feel uneasy because it's, like I said, I had to listen to the whole thing straight through, the Born Again album, and I realized, no, this is just the way this fucking album sounds. This isn't a broken tape. This album really sounds this way. And the only other things I can compare that experience to are when I got the album by Bathory. I bought The Return by Bathory. And I remember the first time I heard that album, it really kind of struck my ears in this very weird way. I was like, especially the cymbal crashes on that album were kind of ear-piercing. Also, Transylvanian Hunger by Darkthrone. The first time I heard that album, it almost makes you think, is this the way it's supposed to sound? Is there some kind of mistake here? Did I get a bad copy? So that's those three albums, Born Again, The Return by Bathory, and Transylvanian Hunger by Darkthrone. Very similar in that nature, in that for me, they were very shocking the first time I heard them. Some of the standout tracks on Born Again are trashed. Once again, I noticed at this time that Tony Iommi and company, starting with Heaven and Hell, they wanted to have these really fast, energetic opening numbers to really rev you up and get you going. And that seemed to be a thing that everyone was doing at the time when you think about it. I mean, because even Ozzy on his first couple solo albums, you know, he had I Don't Know and Over the Mountain. And then on the third album, Bark at the Moon. Dio was doing the same thing on his solo albums after he left Sabbath, you know, with Stand Up and Shout and stuff like that. So this was a very and Iron Maiden, you know, on the Number of the Beast, they had Invaders. I mean, it just really gets your blood going and gets you in the mood for some nice classic metal. And anyway, Sabbath really got into a groove with that on Heaven and Hell. They had Neon Nights. Next album, Mob Rules, they got you going real charged up with Turn Up the Night. Well, they do the same thing on Born Again with Trashed. It's a fucking classic opening number, and of course it tells the tale lyrically of how Ian Gillan got really shit-faced on booze, and then he got in he got into a car. I think it was Bill Ward's car, and you know, he crashed it into a fucking lake, barely escaped with his life. So it's kind of a harrowing thing, but he kind of does. The lyrics on this album are written in a very tongue-in-cheek fashion, and half the time you don't even know what the fuck Ian Gillan is even talking about in some of these songs. He just has a way of spinning these little yarns and doing lots of innuendo and wordplay. You know, that's Ian Gillan's thing. And Trashed is just a great opening number for sure. It sets a tone right away. This is going to be an album that hits you over the face. It's aggressive and pummeling and heavy as hell. And Trash does a good job getting that going. Now, one of my favorite tracks on Born Again is Disturbing the Priest. What a heavy, dark, sinister, malevolent song it is. It just truly, it's just a punishing song. Iommi on this album, his guitar is so heavy, and then Geezer's bass is just boiling beneath the surface and just threatening to swallow everything up. And you know, one thing I can describe about this album and the sound overall is that, like, an album like Headless Cross, you know, if it sounds like it was recorded inside a big castle, okay, and everything's reverberating off the walls, and I can just imagine stained glass windows and big crosses and candles lit. Well, on Born Again would be recorded down in the dungeon, down in the basement beneath that castle, okay, because it's so just sinister and dark. Like I said, it's just it strikes at something evil. And what I'm talking about here is the sound itself, the atmosphere that this music on this album is able to generate. And a song like Disturbing the Priest perfectly epitomizes that. The lyrics, funny enough, they're very dark in nature, but they were really written based on something. When they were rehearsing for this album, there was a priest that was nearby. He asked the band, you know, can you just please turn it down between such and such hour while we're holding whatever the hell it is we're doing over here. And, you know, the band was cool with that. You know, they were like, yeah, that's fine. And Ian Gillan, I guess, even went out for a couple of drinks with this priest. But that funny, lighthearted thing that happened in real life, Ian Gillan took it, and it served as inspiration, a jumping off point for the track Disturbing the Priest. And man, just classic lyrics. You know, do we mind disturbing the priest? Not at all, not in the least. You know, just all that stuff. That punishing pre-chorus section with the riff where it's just bashing you over the head. Man, it's just good stuff. And Ian Gillan on that track, the notes he hits some high, shrieking notes that are just so transcendent and just take you off into another world. Man, you gotta listen to this stuff alone in a dark room sometime. A track like Disturbing the Priest, gotta listen to it all alone in a dark room, dimly lit, and you'll know what I mean. It takes you to another place. I mean, you got the opening song, Trashed, which is perfect to have some beers and, you know, listen to with other people. But then you go down this other dark tunnel, and that's what Disturbing the Priest is. So just a great song. One thing that really came back into play on this album was that in the past, Sabbath had always dabbled in some horror type atmosphere, you know, horror movie type trappings, gothic type stuff. You know, going all the way back to the debut album on a track like Black Sabbath, you know, with the church bells and the storm effects, and then the eerie sounding lyrics about a devil coming to claim a soul, stuff like that. And then at the end of Children of the Grave, you have all those creepy sounds. I remember when I was a kid, those ch-ch-ch sound at the end of Children of the Grave. It always kind of reminded me of the sound from Friday the 13th. And of course on this album, you've got that evil, striking cover art, but a song like Disturbing the Priest takes the horror movie trappings to a whole new level, because it really sounds like the opening of the song. That main riff is very jarring, and then the way Ian Gillan is doing the vocals with the shrieks and the laughs, it just sounds like a cacophony of witches just gathering around a boiling pot or something, like they're boiling dead babies, or just, it's just so evil sounding, and so it's just reeks of lunacy, and just Ian Gillan sounds crazed. I mean, you know, Ozzy has this reputation as a madman. Ian Gillan on a song like Disturbing the Priest just sounds like a raving lunatic. And the way all those voices and the laughter and the shrieking come together, like I said, it just sounds like a coven of witches. Sounds like it would go perfectly with the horror movie. So Sabbath really got back into those kind of things on this album, and it fits perfectly with the sound, because as we've, you know, started to lay down, the sound is just very, very, very dark, very grungy, and very claustrophobic. You really feel like this album is swallowing you up into a sea of blackness. Zero the Hero. Now, that's got a riff, you know, that's been kind of molded and taken, maybe unwittingly, maybe unconsciously, they didn't realize they did it, but you know, that riff in Paradise City that Slash plays, you know, Guns N' Roses, it sounds kind of similar to the riff in Zero the Hero. Danzig on the song Her Black Wings sounds kind of similar to Zero the Hero. So, you know, that might just be a thing where they heard the album, it got in their head. Who knows? Or maybe it was just purely coincidental. But it's a classic riff. That song, Zero the Hero, just starts off with that riff. And like I said before, a word that comes to mind, the way that Tony's guitar and Geezer's bass come together on this album, it kind of has a boiling nature, just this swampy, wet sound, and they're coming together and creating this synergy of evil, and it's so pounding and heavy, and it just keeps churning and going and going and building, and then Ian Gillan comes in on the vocals, and he starts doing this scattershot lyric about some fucking guy. I guess he's a total loser at life or something, but it's kind of funny because the music sounds so imposing and menacing, and Ian Gillan is just singing lines to me that, like I said earlier, they're very tongue-in-cheek. They're kind of funny in a way. You know, they're offbeat in nature. They're odd. And it just sounds kind of funny when it's wedded to this dark, evil music that Sabbath is churning out right here. So, great track. Good song, Zero the Hero. Another song we'll get to, the next one, is Digital Bitch. Now, this has got a nice, another up-tempo, hard-charging number, and I really love the riff in this song. This is a great Iommi riff, and it's perfect for the 80s. I mean, this isn't a 70s riff. The riff to Digital Bitch is pure fucking 80s through and through. And it's so volatile. And when Ian Gillan comes in with it too, and he weds his vocals over Iommi's guitar, it has almost a punkish type frenzy to it. Once again, the lyrics, what the hell's Ian talking about on the song? I don't know. Some rich bitch who's dad made a fortune in computers, and you know, she's just sucking men dry. I don't know. It's pretty intense song. The lyrics are pretty funny. I even read, you know, where people made rumors that maybe Ian Gillan wrote this song about Sharon Osbourne. I don't really understand that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I have a hard time connecting a lot of the words that Ian put in this song to Sharon Osbourne. That seems kind of weird to me. Maybe, you know, maybe a few lines here and there I could understand, but I don't know if that's true. It just seems like Ian Gillan sat there in his little tent with his pen and just kind of wrote, jotted together some nonsense, as he is wont to do on this album. And this is just where I have to interject and just point out that Ian Gillan's vocals on this album are tremendous. The notes he hits are so high. I mean, he really lets loose on this album, and what's amazing about that is around this time, he was actually supposedly having throat issues. I think I remember reading that maybe he had some throat nodules or something. He was healing from something or trying to recuperate from some kind of vocal inhibitions, things that were keeping him down in his solo career or whatever. Before he joined Sabbath, he was having some throat issues. You would never know it listening to this album, because he wails on this album, and it's just mind-blowingly good. The only person I can think of that ever hit notes as high as Gillan on a Sabbath album are Tony Martin on stuff like Headless Cross and Devil and Daughter, stuff like that. But I don't know, man. Ian Gillan really lets loose so much on this album. I think he might have them all beat as far as how high he goes on here. I mean, even Ozzy's lead vocal on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I think that Gillan even tops that on this record, especially on songs like Disturbing the Priest. Oh man, just some high notes. He gets up into the like Rob Halford range, up into like that Stand Up for Exciter fucking range, and it just sounds beautiful to a hard rock metal fan. This is the stuff you want to hear. This is the stuff classic 80s metal is made of, and it just goes perfectly with the music. Now, I really love Born Again, the title track. It's gotta be probably the most depressing and somber song that Sabbath ever put out. And they did stuff like Lonely Is the Word and Solitude and even Planet Caravan. Even though the lyrics themselves aren't depressing, the music is very downbeat in nature. Well, I really think Born Again probably trumps them all as far as pure depression, at least in the musical sense. It's got this timeless, isolating quality to it. At this point, I mean, Born Again along with Disturbing the Priest, those two tracks really epitomize how dark Black Sabbath could get if they really wanted to. And it's really a unique journey. You have Gillan, once again, he's coming in with some lyrics that are just kind of strange, and they just kind of hang there above the music, and they create a weird painting in your mind, when he says, when you look through my window deep into my room, the tapestry's all faded. It sounds like someone who achieved great things maybe in their past. Maybe they're at a lull in their life. The narrator, the singer of the song, is speaking from a place of, okay, I'm down here now. I'm at this point, I'm isolated, but I'm going to come back from this. I'm going to be born again. And, everybody, that's put me at this point, that's put me in this dire place that I am, alone and in anguish, they will be trampled underfoot when I achieve the victorious, level that I'm going to go to. I think that's lyrically what it's trying to say. It's trying to say, I'm going to beat this, I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to be better than ever. The solo that Tony Iommi comes in with towards the end, it just hammers home the sadness of the song, because Ian Gillan may have been singing about, born again and gonna beat this and all this shit, but musically, it stays in the territory of darkness and sadness. As Iommi is a master at doing, as he proved so eloquently on tracks like Lonely Is the Word, he can come in over this sad, churning nature of the music, and he can come in and just do piercing, melodic, sorrowful, great guitar lines that just perfectly complete the song. They just take it to another level, and you just go, there it is. This is primo stuff, classic Black Sabbath, and that's what that track is, Born Again. Just a classic track, and it's another one like Disturbing the Priest. Gotta listen to in a dimly lit environment, and then you'll get the full impact of it. Now, those are basically the highlights for me of the album, you know, Hotline and Keep It Warm. Those are good tracks, but they're not as good as the other ones. Keep It Warm's my least favorite on the album. It's kind of just blah, just kind of just there. Don't really care about that track, but man, I'll tell you what, Born Again, just a classic album. It definitely is. It's funny, on the album cover, I read also at the time that, this is just something I read in one of the books, I don't know how true it is, but they said that Tony Iommi had taken to calling this baby on the cover, he was calling it Amy. Now, that sounds kind of innocent, but Ozzy and Sharon's daughter, who was born around the same time, was named Amy. So, I guess he was allegedly calling the baby on here Amy as a, you know, a sly little dig at them, at the Osbournes. That's kind of funny if that's true, you know. I think stuff like that cracks me up. I mean, Sharon and Ozzy fucking sent Tony human excrement in a fucking box. You know, Tony was in the studio. I think this is around the time he was recording the Seventh Star album with Glenn Hughes. It was either around that time, it was either around Seventh Star or Eternal Idol, one of those. But I think it was Seventh Star. Iommi got this box, he opened it, and there was shit in it. I guess Sharon and Ozzy put shit in a box and sent it to Tony Iommi. Can you believe that? I mean, that's just disgusting. Now that is sick. You know, calling this baby Amy's one thing, but taking shit and putting it in a fucking box and sending it, just gross stuff. But yeah, Born Again, this is a great Sabbath album, my friends. You know, I love all Black Sabbath. You'll never hear me say a Sabbath album is bad. Now, I wasn't a fan of 13. I don't think it's very good, but it's not bad. If you don't have this mighty fine album, you do best to pick it up, because it's just a classic. Look at this photo inside here. This is the nice deluxe expanded edition that came out in 2011. It's a nice picture right there. There's another picture right there. Now, Bill Ward was on this album. They were able to lure him back. You know how Bill Ward is. He was always a little bit of a sensitive guy around this period, shall we put it that way. I like Bill Ward. He's a great drummer. You know, his work on all the Sabbath albums, he did classic stuff. But my nickname for Bill Ward is Crybaby Bill. He was always whining and complaining that the only Sabbath he could truly feel comfortable in playing is the Sabbath with Ozzy. Okay, fine, we get the point. Just play with Ozzy then, you know. But it's just annoying. He didn't want to play with Dio, and you know, I'm surprised they were able to lure him back for this album. But you know, Bill does a good job on Born Again, so. And I guess he was able to maintain his sobriety all the way through the recording. But I guess after Born Again, he lapsed back into alcoholism and everything else. Of course, Ian Gillan was drinking like a fish all throughout the production of this thing. And the cover, Ian Gillan hated this album cover. He said the first time he saw it, he puked. Okay? And then he said when he put it on the turntable and listened to it, he puked again because he was so sickened by the sound, by the album production. Tony Iommi and Geezer, they both loved this fucking album cover, especially Tony. They even said that originally they had toyed with the idea, before they used this album cover, they had toyed with the idea of just putting a cross on the cover. But they didn't want people to get the wrong idea, because the album was called Born Again. They didn't want people to get the idea that they were suddenly born-again Christians or something, that they were coming from that route. So they thought when Tony Iommi said in Doom Let Loose, this book I have, he said when they slapped this on the album cover, on the sleeve, that told you right there they weren't coming at it from some Christian religious angle with the album title. Yeah, this is a dark, menacing album. You You know, it's one of a kind. There isn't another Sabbath album like this one. It just comes from such a grungy, dirty, raw place. As raw as Sabbath ever got. This, along with Dehumanizer, are the two heaviest Sabbath albums, in my opinion. So pick this fucker up if you don't have it. I'm sure all you Sabbath maniacs already have this one. And thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. And if you like this video, please click like, leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys again later.